Marvel movie star Jonathan Majors is involved in a really ugly domestic case that seems to have uprooted his career. But just recently, during the court case, text messages were released in which he allegedly threatened to delete himself because his girlfriend didn't give him a hug. Now, of course, on the surface this sounds incredibly dramatic, but the reason for his extreme reaction reveals not only a problem in all of us, but also why Christ is the only thing that can fix the problem. Here's what I mean. Quick heads up, we're going to get into the disturbing text messages, but because they feature themes of self-deletion, viewer discretion is advised. Alright, so in a text message to his ex-girlfriend, he said, "Last night I considered deleting myself versus coming home. You said you needed love last night, and I put my feelings aside and I tried to give you that. I need love too. Or maybe I'm such a monster and horrible man that I don't deserve it and should just delete myself. This way of existence is miserable. I don't want to exist." And then in another message in which he's complaining that his ex-girlfriend wasn't showing him enough love, he said, "You can't reject love if there's no real love. It's just lip service. I gave you love last night and this morning before I got out of bed. When you got up, you were not full of love at all. I didn't feel it at all. You could have just given me a hug or walked close to me or asked me if you could give me a hug, not the other way around. It works both ways. I will probably delete myself. It's not really contemplating anymore. I'm a monster, a horrible man, not capable of love. I am deleting myself soon. I've already put things into motion." And also in an audio recording, he was recorded saying, "My temper, my censored, all that. I'm a great man. A great man. I'm doing great things, not just for me, but for my culture and the world. That is actually the position I'm in." So why did he say these things? Now, of course, his intended goal could be manipulation or a number of other things, but let's just take these messages at face value. After hearing this, you might think that he sounds bipolar. I mean, if these text messages are authentic, on the one hand, he sounds like he thinks too highly of himself, and on the other hand, he seems to think too lowly of himself. But although I honestly hate to admit this, I think I understand where he's coming from because in the past, I was in a similar mental state to him, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But from seeing this and other things that he said and done, it seems clear to me that he believes that his personal value comes from others holding him in high regard. And whatever we give the ultimate power to make us feel valuable, we also give the power to make us feel worthless. This is why when he feels his value isn't being affirmed and he feels unloved, he tells others how important he really is in hopes that they can recognize it. But if he believes that they still don't value him, he starts getting increasingly self-loathing, even to the point of contemplating removing himself from Earth. So if I'm understanding him right, then we could read his statements to really be saying something like this. "I'm a great man, a valuable man. I'm doing great things, not just for me, but for my culture and the world. Therefore, you should appreciate just how valuable I am." Or, "You said you needed to feel valued last night, and I put my feelings aside and tried to give you that. I need to feel valued too. Or maybe I'm so worthless that I don't deserve it and should just delete myself." Now, once we understand that this is really about being valued, it makes a lot more sense as to why someone as accomplished as him, who graduated from Yale, was featured in multiple Marvel movies and a number of other films, could allegedly be triggered by his girlfriend just not giving him a hug. The reason why is because it's not really about a hug. It's about feeling valued and trying to avoid feeling worthless. Now, as someone who used to get their value from women, I can relate to how he seemed to feel, even though I obviously don't agree with how he's handling it. But before we get to that and why I believe that only Christ can heal this issue, first we need to talk about the sponsor of today's video, Morgan & Morgan. If you're ever in a car accident, first make sure that you're okay. Secondly, make sure you file a police report. Thirdly, make sure you contact your insurance company. And lastly, get legal representation. And trust me, I get it. If you're anything like me, the thought of hiring a lawyer sounds like a daunting task with too much paperwork, too many hours spent in meetings and doing research and so on. But Morgan & Morgan made a simple way for you to submit a claim, upload documents, and communicate with your legal team all from your smartphone. So if you're ever injured in an accident, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. You can submit a claim in 8 clicks or less without even having to leave your couch. For more information, go to forthepeople.com or dial pound law, that's pound 529 from your cell phone. All right, now back to the video. So if I'm right here and his trigger really is the fact that he doesn't feel valued, then his reaction to his girl not hugging him might sound crazy on the surface, but it makes a little bit more sense if his sense of self-worth and value comes from others like his girl holding him in high regard. Now, again, it obviously does not make his response right, but it does at least help us to understand a little bit better. And if you really think about it, all of us should be able to relate to him at some level, because we all have something that if we were to lose that thing, then we would lose our desire to get out of bed in the morning, and we would feel like we have nothing else to justify our existence on earth anymore. The hard part is getting honest enough with ourselves to figure out what exactly that thing is. For you, it might not be a relationship or a woman. Instead, it might be your career or your family, or seeing yourself as a helpful person or a moral person or whatever. It's the thing that your heart says at its deepest level that if I were to lose that thing, then I would have no reason to carry on anymore. That's the thing that we use to get our value from. And so for me, seemingly similar to Jonathan, it was women seeing me as significant, which would lead to some dramatic, unjustified freakouts in the past. And this spilled over into my marriage as well. I wasn't even able to understand why I would have these dramatic responses to perceived rejection. In order for me to even begin to see what was going on, I had to spend a lot of time tracing back to what exactly it was that made me feel so triggered when my wife didn't make me feel significant. What I ultimately found was that I wasn't aware of just how much of my value and self-worth I put into the hands of my wife. If my wife made me feel like I was valuable and needed and wanted, then I could know that I was valued and needed and wanted. But as soon as I felt that she didn't, I would internally panic, because I would subconsciously start to believe that I wasn't valued, I wasn't needed, and I wasn't wanted, and therefore I was ultimately worthless. And going off of Jonathan's alleged text messages, if they are indeed from Jonathan, then it seems that he might be in a similar position. Similar to Jonathan in those alleged conversations, I would oscillate between either feeling arrogant or feeling worthless, depending on how my wife treated me, which ultimately creates an incredibly fragile sense of self-worth. But even when I realized this, it was made even worse once I realized that this desire wasn't going anywhere. We all need someone else to see us as valuable, even if it's just one person. But unfortunately, even if we are fortunate enough to find the one person who values us just as much as we value them, well, people change and people also die. And when they leave, our entire sense of self-worth also leaves, which keeps us in this cycle of having an unstable sense of identity. But what I eventually found was that, and this is good news, is that there's at least one way that I can think of that allows for us to feel valuable and doesn't make us arrogant, and also won't ever crush us. If we all have a deep longing and need to be valued by someone else, then who is the greatest person that we could ever be valued by? Now, you might be thinking about a family member or a significant other, but what if the person who valued you more than anyone else ever possibly could was also the one who created you and also the entire universe? Now, I know this might sound wild, but just think about it. What if you could know that you were valued by God, even if you weren't valued by anybody else on this planet? And what if no matter who you are and no matter what you've done, you could be seen by God as if you've lived a life as perfect as the life that Jesus lived? If you could believe that, then you would never have to worry about your value being tarnished, because that's essentially what Jesus did when he died on the cross for us. Christ took on the punishment for the life that we lived in order for God to see us as if we lived the life that he lived. He then offered us the life he lived as a free and undeserved gift. All we have to do is accept it. And because Christ is the one that did the work for us, then it can't make us arrogant either. We only received it. So practically speaking, if you believe this, then in the moment that you find yourself getting triggered from feeling rejected, then you could recognize that you're forgetting the gospel in that very moment. You could remind yourself that your value doesn't have to be attached to your own life or how others see you. You're perfectly beautiful in the eyes of the greatest conceivable being, no matter who you are and no matter how messed up your life is. And even more, you're finally free from being a slave to what your girlfriend or your wife or your significant other thinks about you. God doesn't change, so nothing can threaten your sense of value and self-worth. And the best part is, it can't make you arrogant since you did nothing to deserve the value that God gives you. And at the same time, it's also the only way for you to get a sense of value from someone in a way that won't ever crush you. So with all that being said, let's pray for Jonathan, his ex, and others involved, and also pray for us to not only see, but also to internalize just how much Christ loves and values us. So that way, we'll no longer find ourselves becoming slaves to what others think about us. And the next time you find yourself forgetting what the gospel message says about you and your value in a specific moment, what are you going to say? What do you mean?